Hello and welcome to the Peggy Notebaert Nature Museum's second Chicago Conservation Corps webinar. My name is Jeanette and I'm the Guest Experience and Engagement Manager at the Nature Museum. I'm also a part of the Nature Museum Chicago Conservation Corps team along with my colleagues who are joining us today. So I'm going to do a quick intro so we know who all is joining us. I'd like to introduce Rebecca Nakaba, if you could say hi real quick. Hi. We have Marjorie Hoffman. Hello. And Erin Ballou.
Hey, thanks for coming in.
Oh, awesome. So they're going to be here answering your questions in the chat and helping us with that. Alrighty. So Chicago Conservation Corps, or C3 as we call it, is a program within the Nature Museum that trains and supports a network of volunteers who implement environmental service projects to improve the quality of life in our neighborhoods. We strive to empower Chicagoans to work on sustainability issues that affect their communities by getting their community members engaged in that effort. With the help and support of our local partners, we usually host a sustainability leadership training course twice a year, one in the spring and one in the fall. The course is 8 weeks long and covers a broad span of sustainability topics. We were very sorry to have to cancel this spring's leadership training, but we're excited to share our partners' expertise and bring a little taste of C3 to all of you who are joining in today. If you have any questions during today's webinar, please write them in the chat window and we'll answer all the questions at the end of the presentation. So I'd like to introduce one of our many awesome partners who help C3 run. Rachel Havrelock is joining us today, and she is the director and founder of UIC's Freshwater Lab. Rachel is usually able to come and join us in our C3 trainings in person to talk about the impressive research and work that Freshwater Labs is working on. But today she's joining us from home to chat about freshwater access and policy during our current times. So thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us, and I'm going to hand it off to you.
Okay, thank you so much. It's nice to be with everyone in this format and to speak about water in our city and in our region and its renewed importance during the pandemic. So we're going to touch on a few issues of immediate relevance. And then as we reach the end of the lunchtime together, I'd be happy to go more into depth on any of these points or to hear any of your questions. So as probably doesn't need to be said, at present, washing your hands is the closest thing we have to a coronavirus vaccine, right? Water in a new, immediate way is at the forefront of our individual and our public health. It's equally important to stay hydrated at all times. So this kind of brings us back to the value of water, the need for water access, the need for good quality water, and also touches on another issue that we're facing right now, which is quantity of water. The pandemic still raging. It is again flood season in the Midwest, in Illinois, and in Chicago. The 2019 spring season saw the worst flooding in our state and in our region that had ever been seen on the planet. In the meantime, Lake Michigan and Lake Huron are at record high levels, and the same can be said for all of our rivers. So we're already well beyond capacity as we hit this rainy season. We are, in the meantime, here today in the midst of what's called a rain event. So in this new normal to which we're all trying to adapt, we don't face rainstorms anymore, but rather rain events. What characterizes a rain event is that under conditions of climate change, we receive a greater amount of rain coming down in a shorter period of time. So it's more rain, but the real issue is that it comes more quickly and in a shorter amount of time. And what defines a rain event is that when that rain hits, it inundates our built infrastructure. So that includes our homes, buildings, roads, sewers, and even what is beneath our feet in Chicago, the deep tunnel system, which is there to store rainwater mixed with sewage. So again, a rain event is when so much rain comes down in such a short amount of time that we simply do not have the built environment that can absorb this kind of rain. Partly why rain events can be so intense in Chicago is because we have something called combined sewers. That means that everything we wash down the drain, as well as anything that is dispensed by a factory or workplace, meets in our pipes with all the rain that falls and goes into the sewers. So our sewage, domestic sewage, industrial sewage, and rainwater all gets combined. It gets held beneath us and at the margins in these huge reservoirs. Sort of in the suburban areas of Cook County and beneath us, and it gets held and then staggered to treatment plants. But with the volume of rain that we're facing in our rain events, there is not enough storage capacity for all of this water. So these are the characteristics of a rain event that often leads to flooding of basements, flooding of roads, even larger flooding downriver of Illinois towns and cities, and even some serious floods in the city itself. It is important to note that, like most environmental issues, we do not share the burden of this equally. Low-income communities are more likely to be built on a floodplain or in areas prone to flooding, and therefore more damage to homes and businesses is sustained in low-income communities of color. So we're in one of these rain events just as we're in a pandemic. It's kind of intense, but a few things to say about that. The first thing is, on an individual level, we can all take preventative steps during a rain event. While the rain is falling, do not run your dishwashers. Do not do the laundry. Try not to take a shower. So in other words, every bit of water that we put down a drain can contribute to the backup of sewers, the reaching capacity of deep tunnel, and even to flooding. So to the degree that you can, obviously we all need to be washing our hands all the time and laundering our masks as best we can. But to the degree that you are able to not use water during one of these rain events, it is a great service to your individual home as well as to the city as a whole. On that note, it also makes an individual difference to pay attention to what is going down the drain. Again, obviously, it is very important to be using disinfectants right now, but all of that bleach, any chemicals also end up in those drains. And when there is a flood, we see often the return of these landscaping and domestic chemicals. So again, it's a really, intense time with the pandemic, but try to the degree that you can to lessen or put no chemicals down your drain. There is no way, right? Our water stays with us in one form or another, and there is no way to which you can send these things. And again, the best thing we can be doing for individual and public health that we know right now is washing with soap and water. And that soap can be biodegradable, and nothing is really gained by having petroleum chemicals in it. So a little bit to get us through this spring, to really pay attention to our water use and anything we combine with it. Now, The other thing that we want to take up as we face coronavirus in our neighborhood, city, state, and country is that this renewed value of water occurs at a time when a high percentage of American households have been facing water shutoffs. The water shutoffs, to put it really briefly, result from the increased water prices that everyone has been seeing in about the past few years, past decade, even 15 years. The reason for the increased price of water is that federal funding for infrastructure has been on the decline since the 1970s. So in the heyday of available federal money for infrastructure, really big systems were built with a lot of hope and American pride. And for example, the water treatment plants of Chicago are the world's biggest. They're massive systems. They're expensive to maintain and also expensive to upgrade and update in the way that they should. So in this loss of federal funding for infrastructure, more of the burden of paying for the infrastructure has fallen to ratepayers. This, again, is a disproportionate burden that is borne on the shoulders of low-income people and communities of color. On this theme, I highly recommend a 3-part series by the Chicago Tribune called The Water Drain that shows how our poorest communities in Illinois tend to pay the most for water, whereas our most wealthy communities tend to have the lowest water rates. So many homes in Chicago in particular, but like other cities, have had their water shut off for non-payment. This is really kind of unthinkable when one realizes that Chicago is on the shores of Lake Michigan in the Great Lakes watershed, which holds 20% of the world's water. So it's a very strange incongruity that we would have so much water that, according to public trust law, belongs to all of us who live in the basin, as well as future generations and other species in the ecosystem. So if we wanted to put it in the language of property, it is our water. And by our, I mean every person resident in the basin. There is no reason to have water shutoffs in this city or the Great Lakes Basin writ large, but that has been the case. Amidst the coronavirus pandemic, many of us fear that there are homes in Chicago that are not receiving a water supply exactly when they need to be washing their hands, flushing the toilet, drinking a lot of water. There has been a moratorium on water shutoffs declared by Mayor Lightfoot last spring. That is extremely positive. There was a water affordability program, not perfect by my estimation, but not terrible either. That program was slated to begin sometime between March and April. Obviously, with everything on hold, we do not have in Chicago yet an operative water affordability program. So what we don't know, and what I and Chicago's Blacks and Green, run by Naomi Davis, Freshwater Future, an organization out of Michigan, and the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization, as well as others, have been working on, is trying to determine if there are homes that had their water shut off prior to the moratorium and are going through this pandemic without water. From a note that I received today, it seems that we've been able to identify at least one household in that situation, and it is my expectation that we are going to find out about many more. So anyone on the call for whom this is an issue, who sees water as a human right, who sees no reason why any household on the shore of Lake Michigan should be without water. There are a few things that you can do. We'll be sharing a letter to Governor Pritzker asking him to issue an executive order that water be restored to all households in the state. An executive order by Governor Pritzker for Illinois would build on similar executive orders that have been issued in Michigan and Ohio. And everyone is invited to sign that. If you want to get involved on the Chicago level, I invite you to donate your time or any available funds to the organizations Blacks and Green or Little Village Environmental Justice Organization. If you know of anyone in this situation without water supply right now, you can feel free to let me know as soon as the Q&A. So that's a very pressing local issue, which is also, in my opinion, also a fundamental human rights issue. Coming to this whole question of rights, another report that I am sorry to have to give is that the United States EPA issued a declaration on March 26th, the very day that the United States became the country with the highest percentage of coronavirus infections. On March 26th, the United States EPA issued a retroactive declaration that it was no longer responsible for monitoring air pollution and emissions, keeping track of hazardous waste, or providing and ensuring safe drinking water to American households. In other words, the United States EPA abdicated its responsibility as the Environmental Protection Agency and said to all Americans exactly when safe water is essential to your health and impaired water quality can increase susceptibility to COVID-19. So exactly when clean air and clean water are more vital than ever, the federal agency that monitors air and water and waste is not doing its job. I would repeat this more for emphasis, but we need to keep moving. This means it is open season for polluters on our water, and there is no federal guarantee that these things are being monitored. So beyond decrying this very lamentable and tragic decision by the federal EPA, what can we do? I would like to make a call for us to begin regional governance of our water. As I said before, we are all members, residents of the Great Lakes Basin, and I'd like to share with you an image, a map of what the Great Lakes Basin looks like as we continue. So a basin is an area of landmass, species, human communities, essentially defined by the rain. So as you look at this map, the area in darker blue represents the Great Lakes Basin. That means if a drop of water falls in any of the areas depicted here, it will end up draining into the Great Lakes. As I'm sure I don't need to tell anyone joining this call, these are magnificent waters. The lakes were carved by the glaciers. This is a freshwater oasis with so much potential in the era of COVID-19 and beyond. I have a lot of great dreams that I'm sure I share with all of you, and many of these ideas and approaches to our basin are available on the Freshwater Lab's website, which is freshwaterstories.com. But to the point, there is in the Great Lakes Basin a remarkable tradition of governing and managing our waters among the Great Lakes states and Canadian provinces as a watershed or a basin. This includes legislation like the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, which sets up targets for water quality and limits to pollution. We've got the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative that addresses historical pollution in the basin. And we also have something called the Great Lakes Compact, which sets certain limits on how much water can leave the basin. So to put it simply, the Great Lakes Compact makes sure that we don't go dry in this part of the world by watering lawns in Las Vegas or sending tankers of water to other countries. What we need to do right now, in the midst of the EPA's abdication and refusal, the federal EPA's refusal to do its job, is we need to build our own agency to govern this water, to monitor it, to regulate how much pollution can come in, what pipelines, oil pipelines move through this area, and who is allowed to extract water, who is allowed to dump in water, who is allowed to permit it, and we need who is allowed to pollute it. And we need to get going quickly. We have a great tradition of basin-wide institutions in this part of the world. We do have state EPAs and environmental systems. We have academics like myself. I'm announcing this and volunteering my time. And we also have really strong traditions of working together with nonprofit groups. We have to get going, and we cannot wait for the EPA to hopefully be rebuilt later in 2020. We need to build our own regional consortium to regulate our water, to make sure it keeps us healthy, it stays healthy, and to deal with these rising waters. So, thank you so much for being here and addressing these issues together. And let's now open this up into a wider conversation.
Thank you so much, Rachel. If any of our viewers have any questions at this time, if you could please put them here in our chat area. We don't have any questions yet, but I actually had a question while you were chatting. I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more about how that transition to regional governments of the water would look like.
Okay. So it actually wouldn't be that hard because, like I said, the federal EPA, nobody's home. No one is going out to known polluters and checking their levels. The federal government is not monitoring what's going on with water quality. As all the Chicagoans on this call may know, Easter weekend, the Hillco Redevelopment Corporation imploded an old coal tower with all of the construction materials and likely some pretty heavy legacy pollutants. They imploded that tower so that a cloud of debris descended on the Little Village neighborhood just in time for Easter and a quarantine. So we're kind of seeing what this means. Pipeline companies, corporations like the Canadian Enbridge is trying to fast track pipeline expansion. So they've, just when no one can go and appear at the permit hearing, the Enbridge Corporation is trying to fast track a tunnel that they want to bore some 60 to 200 feet beneath the Straits of Mackinac, which is really a place of really dramatic currents where Lake Michigan and Lake Huron exchange their waters. So Enbridge is trying to fast track a tunnel beneath the lake bed at this time of quarantine, exactly when tar sands oil that moves through that pipeline are valued at a negative price. So that means we got to get going. But what we would do is we have the Great Lakes Compact. We have a water quality board that is part of the International Joint Commission, which is an agency, Canadian-American agency that deals with water. We've got the Great Lakes Commission. We've got local neighborhood councils, such as the one being established by Chicago's Blacks in Green, as well as the Milwaukee Water Commons. So what we need to do is to lean on these boards and reinforce them with people in expertise and environmental regulation, water quality, access, all the social issues around water. So we need to lean into these boards. We need to call on our governors to give our existing regional boards more authority. And we all need to go and start volunteering our time. Like all of us, whether it's communication skills, regulatory skills, scientific skills, like we need to come together, set thresholds, and do everything we can to help these existing agencies. Also, during the term of Governor Rauner, the Illinois EPA had been pretty decimated. Governor Pritzker, before the pandemic, had vowed to increase the size and bring back the staff to our state EPA. Obviously, he's pretty busy right now. But, this is really the time when we're all thinking about our communities and our participation in them. And there's a beautiful spirit of volunteerism. So let's volunteer for our own health and our water, and let's bring our skills together. And we have to go out and monitor pollution. And when it exceeds safe levels, we've got to stand on it. We don't have anyone else to rely on at this moment, but our collective power and hope for the future.
Thank you so much. It's very inspiring. We've got a question here from Graciela. Is the EPA negligence temporary due to COVID, or is this an ongoing problem?
It's a brilliant question. Thank you for it. So officially, the declaration that was issued in March said that this was because of COVID. So they said that they did not want their staff members to be unsafe by going out to monitor pollution. I mean, I take some issue with that. It seems that the federal government could maybe supply PPE. To me, environmental regulation is an essential service, particularly because it has the correlation between poor air quality and asthma is a pre-existing condition, and susceptibility to COVID has been proven, right? The need to wash your hands has been proven. So I take issue with what the federal EPA did. But to answer your question, it was declared to be a temporary measure because of the coronavirus. However, there has also been some really valuable reporting that shows how the EPA's declaration that it was not going to continue to fulfill its mandate falls into a larger deregulatory agenda, which includes cutting the clean water rule, allowing an increase of emissions for automobiles and factories. There have been so much environmental deregulation. The clean water rule was one that really drove a stake in our heart in this part of the world. But in essence, my interpretation would be that Andrew Wheeler's EPA used the coronavirus pandemic as an opportunity to fulfill what was a pre-planned deregulatory agenda.
Yeah, I think we answered Amy's question in that answer as well. Alrighty. Thank you so much for these questions. We're getting questions about things that we can get involved with. We're going to share a follow-up email after this that will have a lot of links that Rachel had mentioned and some resources for you all to hopefully get involved with this. Thank you, Rachel, so much for sharing this information. This issue affects all of us, especially the Chicagoans joining us today, and I really appreciate that you were able to share all this information with us. Like I said, we'll share these links. We'll share this webinar as well, so you can go back and learn some more. You can stay connected with the C3 community and find information about our upcoming trainings and other volunteer opportunities by signing up for our monthly newsletter. You can also stay connected to what's happening at the Nature Museum by signing up for our daily newsletter. We will be sharing links to these newsletters in the chat right now. You can also find Chicago Conservation Corps and Nature Museum on social media, and we'll be having another C3 webinar next Wednesday at 12. We'll be having Kate York from the Citizens Utility Board, and she'll be discussing your solar energy options. Thank you so much for everyone who joined us today. Thank you, Rachel, again. That was so inspiring and so wonderful. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day.